Hey man,
Hi, Scott. How are you?
doing okay. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
I remember I was reading about every shelter in the John Brown Bulletin maybe
Oh, cool.
a few years ago. I'm an alumni. I think we went to the JBU around the same time.
Yeah, I looked at your LinkedIn. It looked like we were there at the same time.
I don't remember
I,
meeting you, but I think you spoke at the gathering maybe.
I did. Yeah, my senior year, I spoke at the gathering one time.
So
Yeah.
I did hear you speak.
Oh, cool.
So I know your name, and then I saw this come up in the bulletin. I'm like, wow, this is totally a different spectrum of any of the work I've been doing for the last 15 years, and I would love to learn more. Can you give an
Sure.
introduction to yourself and to your group?
Yeah, I definitely can. So I'm Scott Key. I am one of the founders of Every Shelter. I'm the CEO. We have been an organization this April, it will be 6 years, but Every Shelter really started out of work that began for me in architecture school. So at JBU, I studied construction management. I did that for a number of years here in Houston and then really went back to school for architecture because I was really fascinated by architecture's ability to solve problems in the world.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that would mean on the other end of it. But when I was a student, an architecture student, we learned that refugees stay displaced for much, much longer than we thought.
Yeah.
At the time, the statistic that was being circulated was 17 years. You know, depending on the source, some people say over 2 decades. But it was just a lot longer than anybody that I knew thought, definitely longer than I thought. At the time, and this is 2012, there were a lot of Syrian refugees
Hmm.
and Afghan refugees, and a lot of them were freezing to death in the middle of the night. And we're just students, and we're just like, we don't both me and my co-founder had cold weather camped, and we're just like, man, maybe we can do something about that. Maybe we can invent something or make something that would keep people from freezing. So this kind of cleaned up long version of the story, but we spent a lot of our architecture school time in our free time and independent studies trying to solve that problem. We landed a grant with USAID right as we finished grad school, and it allowed us to basically take this prototype that we had created and start working with refugees. And it just so happened to be along the border of Syria and Lebanon. And so
Mhm.
that's about 2015. So all of this work is really predating Every Shelter,
So
but
the
really
Bekaa
foundational.
Valley.
Yeah, we were in the Bekaa Valley
Mhm.
exclusively for about 5 years.
Wow.
And really just focus on floors. I mean, it's aside from freezing to death in the middle of the night, if you spend a lot of your time, so a lot of the households statistically we're spending about 17 hours on the ground, no furniture, obviously. Your kids are really susceptible to a lot of gastrointestinal issues like parasites and diarrhea, and children especially was pretty pronounced. And so having a clean environment is really important. It had the benefit of in the wintertime really keeping families a lot warmer, saving them a lot of money on their fuel. So it's
Yeah.
really kind of the lead up to forming Every Shelter. Sam and I just thought, well, we'll be like product designers for refugee shelters, and we'll scale this product up and then we'll move on to the next one. And really the big takeaway from that time was like refugees exist in a system that was never designed for them to be displaced for 20 years.
Right.
The refugee system has really sort of evolved a little bit, but it needs probably a total overhaul, especially as it relates to like the vision for how you care for somebody for that long.
Sure.
So
So I had a question along those lines because
yeah,
your website said something along the lines that you wanted to change how the refugee aid system worked.
yeah.
And I'd love to know how you want to do that or envision that.
Yeah, I mean, like the name implies that we're really shelter focused, built environment, but that extends out beyond, the shelter to some other aspects, but really always the physical lives of refugees. So, to talk about sort of the status quo really relies on a lot of importation, into these contexts. So
Mm,
86% of refugees live in developing countries. So these are places where, jobs are hard to come by,
yeah.
economies are not, fully developed, but they have the resources really to serve the needs of refugees. And so part of the vision that we had was, really to activate the resources in the community to solve the needs of refugees. So when we started in Uganda, just as maybe a more tangible example to kind of start to illustrate that, the number one item that refugees are given globally across the board, doesn't matter what country you're in, is a tarp. And so when we started in Uganda, we started the organization, we're just like, hey, let's take the number one non-food item and we're going to say, can we manufacture it here? And can we do it better? And can we give refugees jobs in the process? And so that was really kind of our entry foray as a charity into the space, was like, hey, let's take the number one thing. That imported tarp in the field lasts at best about 6 months before it starts to shred apart. And that's a family's only barrier between them and the outside world. It's their
Right.
privacy, it's their, water, wind, et cetera. It's their envelope, as you would say in architecture. So it's really problematic that it doesn't last very long.
Right.
And it's not repairable. And so it's that's this one example of sort of a status quo thing. This thing comes thousands of miles in. It doesn't last very long. There's no waste, management system in these places. So there's just kind of importing trash, basically 6 months fast forward. So we started working with the billboard industry in East Africa, billboards like you see on the side of the road, to upcycle this material that ultimately is a waste product. It's got Coca-Cola's branding on it. You can't use it again. It's got to go away. But we have a very simple process to basically take that waste, that landfill material, and produce something that turns into a 5 to 10 year roof.
Wow.
So we heat weld them, refugees make them, and that was really sort of our starting point in the camps. So to kind of keep going with your question about how we want to transform the system. So that's like, we say, how they get it, who made it, how they get it traditionally in the refugee sector is in-kind aid donations.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey man, here's a coat. And you're like, I already have a coat. Actually, it's really hot here. I don't need a coat. And we had this idea of starting a hardware store so we could actually give refugees agency and choice over what it is they acquired. It's not just kind of a nice thought to honor them as humans, which it is, but we also had a theory that it would be a lot more efficient and effective because, we're working in camps that have 200,000 plus people in them.
Right.
So to say that everybody needs are diverse would be kind of an understatement. And so we wanted to build really a platform that allowed refugees to have more agency and choice over the things that they acquired. So I can kind of unpack the store more.
Oh yeah. I had questions about that. You called it the shelter depot on your website. So my question with that is, how do you, you're wanting them to manage it, but do you co-manage it with them or give oversight to them on how to do I know the goal is to give them agency and their own independence, but what's your relationship with the shelter depot?
So our stores have been open for almost 2 years now, and we run them. We run them with a huge NGO called The Light. Most of the staff and employee are either national or refugees. But yeah, no, the purpose ultimately long term is for us to not do that.
Right.
This will be the first year we launch stores where we're not running them. But yeah, when we found from the early days that to get it going and get it started, this was such a new and weird kind of concept in some ways that we sort of just needed to do it for a while. And that's the same thing with our tarps. Like, we made our own tarps for a while. Now we don't make our tarps, a local business does. So it's like we always feel, oftentimes it's not just like, hey, we have an idea. You also got to demonstrate it, and you got to demonstrate its viability. So this year we'll be working directly with refugee vendors to either adapt stores that they already run or to work with them to launch new stores in places where material scarcity is a reality.
So if the resources aren't actually there in that location, are you resorting to importing or?
So when I say import, it would be from not inside the camp or the settlement, so everything that we stock the store with is things that are acquirable in Uganda.
Okay. So in the country, but not in the camp.
That's right. Right. And a lot of those things are actually manufactured in country. So it's just kind of building a supply chain, making connections that should have been made in the first place.
Yeah. You've said this in a variety of ways already, and then your website kind of already highlights it, that refugees should be the center of their recovery. And that's kind of I'm sensing that's your core ethos. So what are some good stories that illustrate that well?
Yeah. We tell a story about one of our customers named Mary. Mary came from South Sudan. She came with her kids, no husband, and she came to the shelter depot and she saw a model home that we had built that looked a lot like the home that she lived in, but it used some products that she wasn't familiar with. She had a leaky roof for a long time and decided it was time to fix that. So she took training in how to take a local palm frond and actually replace her roof using that.
Wow.
So she was able to afford, the leaves through a program we have called Work for Credit, where Mary was able to go plant trees for 7 days in her community. And instead of exchanging money for products, she was able to work instead for them. So months later, after Mary replaced her roof, she came back and she bought an axe. She used that axe to make a sustainable charcoal product. And, she keeps some and uses it and then sells some. And with that excess, she's been able to put her son in a better school.
Awesome.
And so, we tell that story a lot. People sometimes have more simple needs, sometimes, less dramatic needs, but Mary really kind of illustrates in a sense that I didn't know what Mary needed, right? I didn't know, a charity's not going to run into a refugee camp and say, hey, does anybody need an axe? But if you build a platform that starts stocking products that are in demand in the community, you can kind of have a constantly responsive program model for their needs. And so that's one great illustration. This next example will probably be a little bit more future oriented, but this summer we're going to run an architecture program in the refugee camp for the first time.
Same one or a different one?
Well, so it's going to be, we've got 3 architecture interns and 1 full-time architect on our staff that'll run this basically school for 15 to 25-year-old refugees in this community.
Wow.
So it'll be the first time they're getting any kind of like design education, most likely, but the focus is really on their communities. It's like, hey, can we innovate in this specific place for the community that you belong to? So, in our early days, a lot of it is us seeing needs and responding as designers, but the more that we've had access and like been able to build up our teams, the more it's like, hey, actually, can we innovate within the settlement? Can we innovate alongside refugees to actually solve some of these problems that their own community is experiencing? So that one we're particularly excited about. We try a lot of stuff that doesn't all work. This one I feel like I'm pretty excited about though.
That's exciting. So how do you get funding and permission to go to places like that? I used to live pretty close to one of these larger camps when I lived overseas, and you weren't allowed to go in without UN credentials. So
yes.
How do you get in?
No, that's a great perspective that you have. So in Uganda, it's still the same. You're not supposed to go unless you have permission. It feels a little less like a minimum security prison. I mean, a lot less like that. A lot of the refugee camps in the Middle East are kind of unfortunate in that way. Not kind of quite unfortunate. Uganda allows refugees to have freedom of movement, right to work. That being said, there's a lot of incentives for them to actually live in a settlement. And it's less of an enforced lack of movement and more, it's just really expensive to get from this very remote place to somewhere else. And so it's sort of a cost and geography, restricted place. So your question is how we get funded, privately funded, 100%.
Okay.
80% of our money comes from individuals and churches, some foundation funding. We don't have any kind of institutional like federal funding. So that's how we're funded. And that because of the nature of our work, especially like we're always experimenting, we're always trying new things. It's not always like the best fit for like some of those institutional dollars. But that being said, like the hardware stores that we've created, our partners are starting to apply for some of those more institutional dollars with that program. So maybe another illustration of how we feel like we have a responsibility, not just to ideate, but get something working pretty well. But our scale strategy is always working with these larger NGOs to scale it across their platform. Like we don't want to be, and then how do we get the credentials to work there? So we have a long track record of success, and that's part of it. So we came into Uganda with a lot of years working in refugee camps in Lebanon and then Turkey and also Syria. And so we weren't fully new to the industry, the sector. And then we came at the invitation of one of the large NGOs in our space, which is called the Light. They used to be called the American Refugee Committee. So they were the ones that actually invited us into the settlement. So we work in partnership with them. We're a few months away actually from having our own legal status in the settlements as well.
Nice.
So if you don't have your own, you work in partnership with someone else.
Right.
And we're probably just a few months away now from having our own ability to operate independently. So we'll still work in partnership with the Light. It really kind of functionally won't change a lot.
So your site says that you've worked in 44 different settlements. Where have you been?
Oh man. So I named some of them. We've worked in Lebanon. We've worked in Turkey, Syria, different settlements in each.
Okay, so more than one
camps.
in each country. Okay.
Exactly. This past year, we were in Ukraine for the first time with our floors. I'm not sure that's going to repeat, but we were there. We did some work in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh with the Rohingya refugees.
Nice.
And that was all really kind of predating us deciding as an organization that it was wisest for us to really drill down in one place. It was really clear that we would have kind of a more of an impact if we went deeper in one place.
Than in going many places.
Yeah. So I think 5-10 years, we'll be in other places. But, for right now, with the current size we are at our current funding rates, being in one place and going really, really deep is definitely the decision that we've made. We call our offices studios. A lot of our focus is on design, architecture. So we even kind of in our language try to stay away from like country office, like a lot of NGOs have. And it's just like, hey, these places are places where we want to innovate right here in this place. So
nice. So what's a shelter workshop? I saw that on your site.
Yeah. So for a long time, it was where we made our tarps, literally.
Okay.
I'll say like kind of philosophically, it's this idea of bringing production into into the hands of refugees as much as
Right.
possible. So, for a long time, very literally, it was like a building on our property in the capital where people made tarps.
So
But
not in the
now,
camp.
yeah, this is kind of predating our ability to do that.
Okay.
But now, what it looks like is we run workshops where refugees make different products for themselves at our hardware stores. So it's funny, and this one came from like somebody sent this to us on LinkedIn. We didn't invent this thing, but it has kind of sort of gone viral in this camp. But it's a skylight that you can make by putting bleach water in a water bottle
Huh.
and then gluing it into basically a piece of flashing. So either tarp or what they call iron sheeting or corrugated metal. So we lead these workshops at our shelter depot, and people can't seem to get enough of them. It's really cool. Some of the pictures
Oh,
that
yeah.
we get sent because a lot of these shelters, like if you think about making a window, if you don't have any money, even just an opening in your shelter, that's actually a hard thing to pull off in reality. You've got to have a header. How are you going to keep the water out? And so a lot of the families that we serve actually don't have any fenestrations or openings in their home except for the door.
Right.
And so they're dark. And,
Kind of
it
depressing.
was, yeah, natural light is awesome. I can't tell you how it impacts your life or saves your life or anything like that, but I can tell you that it's one of the most popular workshops we've ever run. And we keep hearing stories of people who have taken the workshop that have then put those skylights in every room in their house. They've done it for their neighbors, and it was really it was really our foray into a program that we're launching this year where we train refugees to build homes for one another. We're like, hey, let's just start at a small level. Can we get refugees building, products for themselves? Can we get them to, build them for each other? Because right now there's a lot of refugees coming in from the DRC in the settlement,
Yeah.
and no one is building a home for them. And so this year, one of the things that we're trying is, can we train refugees to build for new arrivals, especially those who are particularly vulnerable? A lot of our pilots will just do like a little test to be like, man, is this totally falling flat, or is this something that seems like it's got some traction? And sort of silly thing we saw it on LinkedIn. I think the actual person who created it is in Brazil, but I actually don't know the provenance of it. But people kept sending it to us. That happens a lot at every shelter. Like, hey, have you seen this? And
Yeah.
and then we were like, hey, that seems like something that might be desirable for folks. And so, but it was a little bit of a test case for us to see if we could try out something a little bit more ambitious. So
I mean, it reminds me of Dr. Kim's school. I don't know if you're familiar with
yeah,
Dr. Kim,
yeah. I
but
wish I'd known about it when I was a student. I found out about it after I was his appropriate technologies classes,
yeah,
right?
I took
Yeah,
his, he has an institute now, and I took a 1 month training with him and my wife on
that's
his
cool.
training school for it. But like he has like 50 ideas like what you're describing,
Yeah.
and then taught us how to build it. And I don't have a construction or engineering background, but I could borrow some things from him and say, oh, this is a solar cooker made out of cardboard and like Christmas paper and
Yeah.
can cook food really well if if you design it and insert all those interesting things.
Oh, I love that parallel. And yeah, I mean, it's sort of like bringing that energy into the settlement. It's like,
Yeah,
and that's really what that architecture studio is going to be focused on. This, you're just sort of like, hey,
so cool.
go out into community, find out what people are struggling with. Like, we can source ideas from anywhere,
Yeah.
but we gotta make it work here. So anyway, I'm pretty stoked about it if you can't tell.
Yeah, I can tell. I'm excited with you. I wanted to know after I did that training for a month, how and where it can be used. And it seems to be like really specific locations, but it never really dawned on me that a lot of those types of projects could be really utilized well in refugee camps. But oh,
I
so
mean,
cool.
a lot of how I think about how we've gotten to this point is like we've put a lot of the infrastructure in place to drop ideas or concepts or ideas into, and it works or it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And we've definitely tried plenty of things that haven't worked. And it felt like something that should have felt like it was really solving a problem, but for a variety of reasons, just didn't really take off in the community. And so,
Hmm.
we've really built kind of that platform, that pipeline and we like that because I mean, if the community doesn't want it, they don't want it. You
Yeah,
didn't
it
build a
needs
whole charity
community
around that
ownership for it
thing.
to work. Yeah. So cool. So this was a quote from your website. Refugees are talented, skilled, hardworking people. It only makes sense to train them to be the producers of the goods needed by other refugees. Whether there are products or others, we want to build a model that sees refugees not just as victims, but as collaborators and producers. I think that's kind of what you've said in almost every question. I find that really inspiring. Just I want to figure out how to adapt that even to our own context. Like we're not working in camps, but we help resettled peoples. And so how can we push that perspective even in our own context of how can we allow the newcomers that we're serving to be participants in their own solutions. And I like it. It's really good.
Well, and I'll like stand on the other side of the fence too, and just say like there is room for expertise and knowledge that they often don't have. I mean,
Yeah.
we put architects in those places for a reason because they're
Hmm.
trained to like see certain things. I mean, and we've done it. If you survey a lot of refugees in Uganda, they won't prioritize the like replacing their dirt floor as
Hmm.
opposed to other improvements to their home. Well, hey, look, we know statistically that's not good for the children, and so
That's what
there
the JBU
is,
article is about. You were doing something with flooring that was
yeah,
like something that improved the health of the home or something like that.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
that part of the billboard tarps or is that something different?
So we do now make floors there as well out of the billboards, and that's actually probably going to be a more substantial life for the billboards that we recover,
Hmm.
is making floors for people. But yeah, sometimes I guess the point I'm trying to make is like sometimes outside expertise, like you can see things that are a need that maybe even the individual can't articulate,
Yeah.
and they may not see it because it's like well, how do I know that my kid living in the dirt is what's causing them to have diarrhea all the time?
Right.
I mean, there is that kind of balance of pairing expertise, and I don't know how to necessarily translate it into y'all's work, but it's like we found that collaborating, listening, having them participate, be authors, etc., like all that is invaluable, but often paired with an expertise that we can bring to the table.
Right. It's something
And
you're
and
doing with
it's
them in collaboration.
yeah, and I think yeah, I think I'd be remiss to just not say that, and there's things that y'all are likely in your work bringing to the table that they may not know. I mean, y'all are working with resettled folks. Is that
Yes, yes. Asylum seekers, refugees, some of it's just adjusting status for people that come here, helping them apply for green cards. And then uniquely, we have the faith communities that support us bundled a lot of their resources together to buy 2 homes where we can house 6 families. And while they stay there for free, we can help them with their asylum case or
yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
That's so cool.
That's that specific niche of the work. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, but we're real specific too. I mean, it's like you say the word refugee, it actually means a lot of different things depending on the
it
context.
does.
And I mean, historically, we haven't been emergency responders, which is, another side of the coin. We've found ourselves a few times in positions where we can be emergency responders. We don't jump on airplanes and try to do something that we're not good at. After the earthquake in Turkey, we were already manufacturing our flooring system there, and so we were able to respond pretty rapidly. But it was
Wow.
just that we were in position to do it.
Yeah.
And then, same thing right now with the DRC. There's so many refugees coming in. This rebel group called M23 just took over Goma, and even predating that, like we've just seen a huge influx of people.
Mm.
Well, our staff's already there. Like we're already running programs in this place, and this is one of the places where a lot of these families are arriving to. And so
Mm.
we've had to re-gear some of our thinking and work to just say, how do we help somebody who's just getting here?
Yeah.
But really, we just do
Mm.
that side of the coin, the emergency response phase of it, really when we're just in a position to do it.
Yeah.
So we're not really kind of built to do that. Otherwise, they're our organization. They've got airplanes. They've got lots of money. They just rush in after something happens, and that's not how we're built. But
Yeah.
now this is the second time we found ourselves in a position to be able to help in a real way.
Sure. This is awesome. I mean, for me, what I'm just excited about with your story is I know refugees more who have been resettled or have come here. When I lived in the Levant, I knew Syrians that were coming across the border, but this is just a whole different niche than I'm usually exposed to that helps me see the bigger global story that's happening with newcomers or displaced people that never even make it to the States or other places
Yeah.
like that. So big takeaways for me. Thank you.
We could probably spend 30 minutes talking about our love for the Levant. So I'm sure.
Yeah, I love the Levant. I want to go back.
I do too, man. I miss needing to spend time there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure this is going to be a blessing to the people that will watch or listen to this.
Well, thanks for thinking to invite me.
Yeah.